The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for joining us today to hear the webinar on what to expect from the Arizona Merit Test. The webinar is being sponsored by the Arizona Association of School Business Officials and the Arizona School Boards Association. I'd like to thank Mike Barcia for providing the IT support for this webinar. And before we get started, there's been a lot of questions about why are we doing this webinar right now, with today being the first day of the pen and paper test that's being given. In other school districts, we're also giving the online testing beginning the week of March 30th. And really, this is the perfect time because we want to talk about some of the policy issues that are going on, some of the questions that have yet to be answered, what to expect, how to talk about this within your local communities, whether you're a school board member, an administrator, a teacher, community member. And we have no better person here than Dr. Joe O'Reilly, the Executive Director for Student Achievement for Mesa Public Schools, who serves on a variety of committees for testing, research, accountability, and we're just so very pleased that he was willing to take time in order to talk to us about these issues. I also like to thank Mesa Public Schools for providing that time, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. O'Reilly to take us through what to expect.
Thank you, Janice, and good morning. As Janice said, students throughout the state are taking the AZMERIT test today and will throughout April and into early May, depending on how your computer testing is scheduled. As the educational leader in your community, we want you to know enough to be able to discuss the test with your constituents. So my goal this morning is for you to have a clearer picture of the test and how it will be used. And hopefully you'll be able to better communicate with your constituents. So what I'm going to talk today about is these topics. I'm going to start out with the basics, probably things you already know, but I just want to cover them because of some rumors and things I've heard. I'm going to talk about AZMERIT items compared to Ames items, where they're different, about Arizona's movement to online testing, and then the million-dollar questions: how will they set what is passing and how students will do on the new test? And finally, I'll end up with a little discussion of accountability and how school letter grades and Title I accountability might be impacted by the new assessment. Disclaimer, I used ADE materials and State Board of Education materials and other information available publicly to put this presentation together. So I very much appreciate all the resources they've put out. But I did the presentation, so it's not coming from ADE or the State Board. I'm responsible for any errors, not them. So I just want to make that clear that this isn't an ADE presentation. So the errors, any questions should come to me, not to ADE. Let's start with the basics. AZMERIT is unique to Arizona, and it's based on the Arizona test blueprint. One rumor out there is we're giving the same test as other states. Some people still think we're giving PARC, which we're not. We withdrew from the PARC consortium. PARC actually bid on the state testing contract, but did not win it. And so we went our own way, an Arizona way, and created a test that's unique to Arizona. We did it using items from the SAGE item bank, and those items are used in Utah, Florida, and Tennessee. And we're not giving the same test that Florida is giving. We're not giving the same test that Utah is giving. But we are giving some of the same items because algebra is algebra, but not all the standards in Arizona are the same as those other states, so our test is not the same. As we mentioned, it's computer-based. I know in our district we had 30 schools start on March 30th, and we have schools testing all the way through May 8th. But this week, on Monday, we started our paper testing, and that will be going on for the next 2 weeks. AZMERIT replaces most of Ames, the reading, the writing, and math, but it doesn't replace science. So we're still giving Ames science in grade 4, 8, and biology. And probably in your district, they're giving it either before AZMERIT or after. AZMERIT measures mastery of the Arizona College and Career Ready standards, and Ames did not. It measured the old standards. And Arizona educators have reviewed and approved every item used as being appropriate for Arizona students. I should also mention, this year we're giving SAGE items, and over time they're going to be replaced by Arizona written items. But the SAGE items were all reviewed in Utah by a committee of parents, and no item got into that bank without at least one or two parents seeing it, however many they had on the committee, and approving of that item. So let's compare AZMERIT to AIMS. AZMERIT is provided by AIR, American Institutes for Research, or sometimes called AIR. So if you hear people talk about AIR, that's our test provider. We've had other test providers in the past. We've had Harcourt, CTB, McGraw-Hill, Pearson, Riverside, and others. AZMERIT, AIR, is just another national testing firm. It's also a research firm. You can see from this graphic, kids taking these new tests are having a very different experience than you and I had when we took the Iowa test or other basic skills tests. The item formats overlap, but there are some very significant differences. AIMS is all multiple choice plus an essay. AZMERIT is 80 to 85% multiple choice items and short answer, plus a writing assessment. The computer-based tests include technology-enhanced items, and I'll tell you what that means in a few minutes. AIMS multiple choice items had 4 options, and you chose the correct one. AZMERIT has a lot of multiple choice items that have 4 options, and you choose the correct one. But they also have items that are not limited to one choice. Choose 3 out of the following 5 statements. Choose all the statements below that are true. And there might be 8 options. So they get exposed to items in a different way than they did on AIMS. So let's look at some of the items. Here's an AIMS sample test item for high school math. And a student has to, what does not represent y as a function of x? And the student goes through there and saying, well, I can eliminate 2 immediately. So I have a 50-50 chance of getting this right. And then if they know, they choose the right option. If they don't, they then choose their best guess. Here's a technology-enhanced item that's an AZMERIT-like item. So on the left-hand side, you can see a prompt that a student would work with. They'd read the question, and they'd press the play button at the bottom. And the play button would show the Ferris wheel going around, and the green gondola, which is about 8 o'clock on the Ferris wheel, moves around the Ferris wheel, and below it is graphed over time. So the student doesn't choose one of 4 answers. The student has to write a function that models the height of the rider at t seconds during a ride of 4 rotations per minute. A very different type question, but a more engaging question. In fact, we surveyed some of our 8th graders who've already taken and finished the test, and one of them said, it's a much harder test, but I like it a lot better than those old tests we used to take. Here's another math item from AIMS practice test. Okay, what are the coordinates of P when triangle PQR is dilated by a scale factor of 3 using the origin as the center? Okay, there's a lot of math vocabulary in there. I haven't been in school for a while, so dilated is just something that happens at the eye doctor to me. I'm not sure exactly what they mean there, so I'm going to guess. And I have 4 choices there to guess. Now I can take AZMERIT. Similar item, but triangle PQR was reflected over the x-axis and then translated 7 units to the right to create PQR as shown. Draw the original triangle. So what a student would have to do is go to the top on the right and click Add Point and start drawing the triangle. Add the second point and then do the Connect a Line. So the student would actually draw the triangle on the graph as to where the original triangle was, and then you drag the P, Q, and R to the right corners of the triangle. If you're taking this paper and pencil, you simply draw with your pen or paper or pencil on the graph in the test booklet, and then that gets scored. Okay. So what's different here is the student doesn't get choices. The student actually has to create the answer. Here's an English language arts item, a reading item. A student has read a letter, and so based on the letter, which of the following statements is an unsupported inference? And there are 4 choices. The student chooses one of them. It's a typical AIMS item. Here's an item that's technology enhanced. You read on the left-hand side, and you can see the little scroll bar. You can scroll up and down through the reading passage. And on the right-hand side would be the question. So the student has to select the sentence from the paragraph that contradicts his argument. So you do that by you mousing over the sentences. And when you get to the right sentence that you want to choose, you click on it, and it highlights that sentence, and that's your answer. No multiple choice, it's the highlight. And you can see that They don't stop there. The next question is, explain why the sentence you highlighted undermines the author's own argument. Much more cognitively demanding than just a multiple choice item. And that kind of leads to why Arizona is moving to online testing. You have new test features. You have more engaging items. Students can get tools, so if they need a graphing calculator, your district doesn't have to buy graphing calculators for everybody. It can be delivered by the computer. If students need a reference sheet for a science item or for a whatever math item, you can have a reference sheet specific to that test. Students can also, when they eliminate items, they could actually cross it off electronically and focus on the two that they can't eliminate as which is the right answer. There are more accommodations for special ed students. If a student does better with a colored overlay or maybe a colored background as compared to the black and white, they can choose that. If you want to have it enlarged, it can be enlarged up to the limitations of the computer. There are many more things you can do with accommodations on a computer that you can't do on paper pencil. And the computer-based tests are less expensive than the paper tests. They're also less expensive to the districts and the time and effort of people because you're not opening boxes, counting out piles of 30 or 35, getting it to the class, at the end of the day, getting it back in, inventorying them, getting them back out the next day, and then packing them all up and shipping them off to the testing company to be scored. You get rid of all of that. There are some tasks that offset that, but it's less expensive to district in terms of time and effort. They're also, as I said, more engaging for students, or at least that's what the students are telling us, especially now that they're new. This format is not something they've seen. But it does require one computer for 10 students and adequate bandwidth so that the students' responses can be sent to the testing company and scored. Now, not everyone will be able to go to computer, and the state recognizes that. Paper tests will still be offered for the life of the contract. I think the current contract is 3 or 4 years. As we move to computer testing, students need certain technology skills. We always say when it comes to tests, the score is a function of the content knowledge, the motivation to do well on the test, and the students are telling us this is more motivating as a test, but also familiarity with the format and the tasks. So students have to be able to move the computer around, and they also should be seeing some of these item formats in regular instruction. So the question is, how is your district ensuring that students have the chance to learn these skills that they have to demonstrate on the new assessment? And the big question I get is, can online and paper tests really be compared? And statistically or psychometrically, yes, they can be. But beyond that, most test items on the tests are identical. The AZMERIT compared on paper versus AZMERIT on computer is 84 to 100% the same test items, depending on grade and subject. The paper-based test, if it's an open-ended response, the student has a place to write their open-ended response. There were some cases where an innovative item type was not able to be translated to paper. For example, if they had a Ferris wheel sample item, that obviously couldn't translate to paper, but it was replaced with a comparable, more traditional item. And the psychometricians will be looking at how students do on paper compared to how they do on computer, a mode comparability study, but it's how did they do on each style of test to see how students did. And they'll be putting the paper and computer-based results on the same scale, so the results are comparable. The challenge ahead is what's passing? That's the big question now. Students are taking the test. What do they need to do to pass? And the performance level needed to pass or reach the other levels of performance will be set this summer. And the goal is passing should indicate college and career readiness. This is a much tougher standard than AIMS, which was measuring 10th grade mastery. And it's actually a much tougher standard, even down to 3rd grade, than what was expected on AIMS. ADE is recommending that there be no descriptors, just numbers, levels 1, levels 2, 3, and 4. So 2 levels of proficiency, 2 levels of not proficient. If your superintendent tells you, hey, we have so many number 1 kids, we're number 1. That's not a good thing if this is the choice that goes through, because you want to be number 4. You want to have a lot of number 4 students, highly proficient students. I have a link here where you can read the the memo about this and see the state's PowerPoint that was provided at the March State Board meeting. So the proposal is not to have any names, but as we discussed, we thought, well, the State Board may want to have names. So what could those names be? And we started that discussion. And we've gotten input from educators, test coordinators, board members about what descriptors would sound best to them. So far, what's in the lead is highly proficient, proficient, approaching proficient, below proficient. 70% of the people who've surveyed have ranked it first or second. And the next most popular one was advanced, proficient, partly proficient, and not proficient. 47% ranked at 1 or 2. The State Board PowerPoint, they have those 4 levels. Well, it actually had 4 descriptors to go with these 4 levels, and those descriptors were highest level, first passing level, highest non-passing level, and lowest level. It wasn't intended that those be the descriptors, but that started the rumor that those were the descriptors as the state was proposing, and people did not, for the most part, like those descriptors, and you can see it wasn't ranked very highly in the survey either. But again, the state didn't intend. These were more descriptive for the State Board to understand which was the highest and which was the lowest. These were not intended as the levels. What do you think? What do you think the labels should be, if there are labels? You can go to this link and give us your opinion. The various descriptors were brainstormed by curriculum and testing folks in the East Valley, and it's kind of grown as we've expanded this to others to say if there have to be labels, if they're going to be labels, what descriptors would be best for you? We have to live with these for many years, just like we did the FAME scale with Ames. So we want to put some thought into it now. In addition to a brief descriptor, there's going to be a paragraph, a performance level descriptor that describes the skills and abilities that students must demonstrate for that performance level. AD is proposing some. You can find it on the State Board presentation. And also your superintendent should have gotten a survey from ADE on those performance level descriptors, for the state saying which descriptor sounds best to you. So they're collecting information on that also. I should also mention that ADE is using volunteers throughout the testing process. So a question I have for you in your district is, have your educators volunteered to serve on ADE committees, and have you supported them serving on ADE committees? Woody Allen said, the world is run by those who show up. And if you want to have an impact, if you want to have a say, have your staff and others volunteer. If there's opportunities for board members to volunteer, ASBA will let you know of that, and I encourage you to volunteer to be on some of these review committees. The big question now is, how do they set the passing score? And that is not publicly, the details of that are not publicly available, but we know the process they're going to be using. It's called the Bookmark method. It's the same process they use to set the passing levels on Ames. And this is generally how it goes. The specifics of how we're doing it in Arizona might be a little bit different. The details might be a little bit different, but generally what happens is groups of teachers and curriculum specialists who really know student performance at a grade level come together. And there might be 3 or 5 tables of teachers who all teach the same, say, 3rd grade. And they come together and they're given a booklet. Here's the 3rd grade test items in math, or a booklet with the 3rd grade test items in reading, listed from the hardest to the easiest. And their task is to go through that booklet and say, where's the point at which a student who's just barely proficient? Well, I have a 2/3 probability, I think, 2/3 chance of getting that item right. Go to that item and put your bookmark right below that. So the teachers go through and they say, nope, too difficult, too difficult, too difficult. I think this student could get that item right. And that's where they set their bookmark. Then as a table, you discuss it and you kind of come to consensus. And then however many groups of the same grade level and subject come together and they come to consensus on where the bookmark should be. They do that for each performance level. And sometimes after those are all set, they'll bring in other committees of people to look at where they were set to see if they kind of agree with what the educators thought. I don't know whether that's going to happen this year. We've got a very tight timeline, but If it does happen, I'm sure ASBA will keep you informed of that. But it's not just the teacher's decision. The teacher is also given some guidance on what performance looks like in other places as they make their decision. So every test has a different scale. There are a bunch of different rulers showing you different scales. But what it represents is a lot of tests every test has its own scale for the most part. You make scales comparable by putting some items from one test on another test and seeing how students perform. And then the psychometricians can then say performance on this test is like performance on the other test generally. And that's what they did here. So the National Assessment of Educational Progress, SAGE Item Bank from Utah, so how Utah, Tennessee, and Florida perform. Smarter Balanced, a consortium of 22 states on the Ames test, how AZMERIT scale would compare to the Ames scale. The ACT College and Career Ready Index, and the International PISA test, the last two being high school comparisons. The committee will get some information on this level on AZMERIT will be comparable to be passing it in Utah or in Smarter Balanced or College and Career Readiness as defined by ACT. You will never be able to get a report that says this AZMERIT score for this student corresponds to this ACT score. That's not the intention, and that's not how it's set up. It's to kind of say, in this general area is passing on ACT compared to AZMERIT. There will also be a committee of higher education folks who will look at the AZMERIT and say, from Arizona college and university points of view, this is what it takes to be college and career ready. And that information will be available to the people who are setting the high school passing rates. So it's professional judgment informed by all of these other performance indicators. The bottom line is it's not likely that they're going to set a very low bar for student passing. It's likely it's going to be a rigorous bar for passing the AZMERIT test. The timeline is July 13th through 17th. The teachers and the curriculum specialists will come together. AD plans to make recommendations to the state board as early as July 27th, but it's possible it could be at the August meeting. And the state board is a group that makes the final decision about cut points between performance levels. So all of that teacher input and all the other information is to inform the board and give them professional judgment, but the board makes the final decision. Okay. So the next question is, how will students do on AZMERIT? And my guess is Arizona is probably not going to do that much differently than other states. And that is not that well. So what we have is higher standards, which third graders have been exposed to since kindergarten, but eighth graders not so much. They have only been exposed to the new standards for a couple of years. We have tougher questions where students can't get 25% right just by choosing 1 out of 4 multiple choice options. We have less familiarity with the new item formats because this is a new test, and the practice test didn't come out until I believe it was February. So how do we expect students to perform? Probably not as well this year. So let me tell you why I think that in more detail. Kentucky was a little ahead of the other states, Kentucky and New York. So in 2012, Kentucky came out with its new assessment. And the yellow bar represents the percent passing on the new assessment. The green bar represents the percent passing on the prior assessment. You can see generally the yellow bar is half the size of the green bar. And that's what I kind of expect in Arizona, roughly. You see the same performance, the same pattern in math in New York as you do in Kentucky. What's interesting is Kentucky made a real effort to get parents and community members to know that that's going to happen. And so when the results came out, only 40% passed, when before we had 70, everyone said, yeah, that's kind of what you told us was going to happen. And it didn't raise as much of a hue and a cry as it did in New York, where parents were not prepared. And parents came out in wrath and fury saying, what do you mean my child is not proficient now? Because they weren't prepared as well as the groups in Kentucky. So one of your tasks is going to be helping prepare your community. The Smarter Balanced assessment, they did a pilot this year with millions of students, and based on that pilot, they've set passing levels. And in those 22 states, 60, 70, even in the high 70% were passing. But now you can see it's going to be in the 30s, maybe the low 40s in terms of percent passing. So what's going to happen? The percent passing is going to go way down in 22 states, and those results are going to come out about the same time our results are coming out, maybe a little bit before. So if 22 states show that decline, if New York and Kentucky show that decline, I would expect to see the same thing in Arizona. So the percent passing will drop, and really that's a good thing. It shows expectations have changed. If we have the same percent passing, then we haven't changed our expectations from adequate 10th grade skills to expectations of post-secondary preparedness. So in a world where jobs and opportunities can go to the best prepared, we're ensuring that Arizona students are being held to similar high standards as students across the country, so they can compete as they go out into the job market and the education market. And I think Governor Ducey would agree. He just spoke to the state board, and what he basically said was, Ames is giving the false impression to parents. It's saying kids are proficient when they're not. And he compares NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress, to Ames passing rates. And you can see that the NAEP passing rate in 8th grade is 30 to 40 percentage points lower than Ames. And he said that is accurate, not Ames. And that is too low of a passing rate. So it seems he will be in favor of rigorous measures also. There's one group that may not be, and it may not be seen as a good thing by parents. Parents whose students have been meeting the standard for years will suddenly be labeled as proficient. The student's ability hasn't changed, the quality of the teaching hasn't changed, but it will seem that way to parents. And there will probably, if we're like New York, there'll be schools with 0% passing. How are we going to explain that to parents? So you need a strategy to prepare parents before the results are released, and a strategy for responding after the results are sent home. So your challenge is to lead your community, help them understand low passing rates are expected, and we're resetting what we expect from schools and students. Frame it as a new higher challenge. Don't frame it as a failure. And help parents understand that it's a moonshot, not a failure. And the longer term picture is ensure your district improves performance over the next few years to meet the new expectations. That's our real challenge as districts and schools, because we expect the initial scores to be lower, but 30% passing is not going to make it in the long term. Luckily in Kentucky, they just came out with some studies showing that the high school students are performing better on independent measures like ACT now that they have a new assessment and they have new standards. So it can be done, and we're going to have to make it done. When will you get the results? They're going to be released in the fall, probably by November, so you have some time to talk to your parents. In future years, the results should be available by the end of May. What does AZMERIT mean for people? Well, for students, high school students, as you know, do not have to pass to graduate, but in the future, the results will be incorporated into course grades. For move on when reading for third graders, there is no consequence for AZMERIT. AZMERIT will not play a role in that process this year. You will make some determinations using other methods, but AZMERIT this year will not be used in move on when reading. It may be used in future years. The state board will have to address that. In terms of schools, a bill was passed to suspend letter grades for 2 years, so all accountability data will be made public, but a letter grade will not be applied to schools for 2 years. The bad news of that is it's April, next month is May, and year one is done. So we've got a 2-year window, but 1 year of the window is almost already gone. Also, Arizona does use the letter grade system as part of the federal accountability system. We still have to identify 95% tested and identify priority and focus schools that are title schools, and the state will be doing that using AZMERIT for those purposes. So there is a little bit of accountability that's going to go on for the lowest performing schools and the schools that have the largest gap in performance. But for most schools, there will be no letter grade or Title I labels. So in summary, AZMERIT is a more challenging and a more engaging test than Ames. It has new question formats that require students to show what they know, not just multiple guess. The results will be comparable whether a student took it on paper or on computer. And what it takes to reach each performance level will be set this summer using teacher volunteers and others. We expect passing rates to be about half of what we had with AIMS, and that's a good thing, but it will be a shock to parents and the public. And there'll be limited use of the test for accountability for the first 2 years. But after that, if we don't rise to the challenge, it's going to come back to bite us. So I give you some homework. What teacher can't assign homework to a class? You need to communicate with your parents and your community. Make sure they know expectations are very different. Let them know it's because expectations have been raised, and they have a role in rising to those expectations. And as a leader of your district, make sure the district has made the curriculum, instruction, and resource allocation decisions that will improve the scores going forward. So with that, I will turn it back to Janice.
Thank you, Dr. O'Reilly. Very, very much appreciate your time, and a lot of information included in there, both of what is as far as the difference between AIMS and Arizona Merit, as well as the policy implications that are happening at the local level, state level, and we very much appreciate your time and all of the information that you provided. Also, just another item, we will look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be having our legislative and budget webinar wrap-up. Look for an infographic coming out later or in the next couple of days. It will be next Tuesday, April 21st at 10 a.m. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the day.